Hello. Welcome to our next chapter, that is your offenses and penalties. So this we are doing from our IDT in 50 pages, and hard copy and soft copy both options are available. Link is in the bio. Okay, so let's start. So now section 120 to 1 has 18 offenses, has a list of 18 offenses, and these 18 offenses are bifurcated into 5 different groups. So first is offenses with regards to registration, second is your offenses with regards to supply, third is your offenses related to tax, fourth is offenses related to books of accounts, and fifth is your miscellaneous. So all of them has 4 each, and your miscellaneous has to bring in the total to 18. Now what is the penalty? What is the penalty under this section? Under section 120 to 1, which has 18 offenses, the penalty is higher of rupees 10,000 or the amount involved. Okay, so 10,000 or the amount involved, whichever is higher. So these are your 18 offenses. So with regards to registration, when you are liable but fails to obtain registration, false information given for obtaining registration, during a registration you have to give some documents, you have to give some information. If those prove to be false, you will be prosecuted under this section. Issue invoice using registration number of another person, that means you issued invoice but your GST number is not yours, you've given someone else's. Suppresses turnover, you will suppress your turnover so that you don't have to register under GST. Okay, so these were with regards to registration. Next is with regards to supply. So supply without invoice or any false invoice. Transport without cover of prescribed documents. So you also need your required documents to transport your goods. Next is issue invoice without actual supply. You are just issuing an invoice. There is no actual supply being taken place. So you are issuing a fictitious invoice. Reason to believe that liable for confiscation. Reason to believe that your supply is liable for confiscation. Okay, next, third is your tax. So tax collected but failed to pay within 3 months from the due date of payment. So if you collected tax, if you collected CGST, SGST portion, but you failed to pay this amount to the government, this tax is not your money. You have to pay it to the government. If you have not done for a period of 3 months, then you will be prosecuted under this section. Fails to deduct tax or collect tax, takes or distributes ITC in contravention of section 20. So if places where ITC is not allowed and you have taken or distributed, that will be covered under this section. Takes or utilizes ITC without actual receipt of goods or services or both. If you remember, while we were doing our ITC chapter, while we were doing a revision of ITC chapter, it said that you will be able to input ITC, you will be able to take credit of tax paid only and only when the goods have actually been received. Okay, next is your books of account, that is fails to keep or maintain your books of accounts, fails to furnish when called for, when books of accounts have been called for, falsifies or produces fake books of accounts, and tampers or destroys evidence. So in case you destroy your books of account, this will also be coming under this section. So we have already done our 16 offenses. Now your 2 offenses is obstructs or prevents officer in discharge of his duty. That means you're not letting an officer, the GST officer, do his duties. And last is disposes of or tampers with any goods that have been detained, seized, or attacked. Okay, so we did 18 offenses. We did 18 offenses, and where the penalty is the amount involved or 10,000, whichever is higher. Amount involved or 10,000, whichever is higher. Okay. Now coming to your next section. That is section 122. Now 122.2 says about supplies on which tax has not been paid or ITC has been wrongly availed. Supplies on which you have not paid tax or you have availed ITC where you were not actually allowed. So the penalty in such a case where it is due to fraud, willful misstatement, or suppression of fact, that means this is you are doing it purposely. Therefore, over here it is your higher. It is higher of rupees 10,000 or 100% of tax due. 10,000 or 100% of tax, whichever is higher. And if it is for reasons otherwise than these, then it is 10,000 remains the same, but instead of 100% of tax due, it will become 10% of tax due over here also, whichever is higher. Okay, so wherever the penalties, I've put it in red so that you will remember. So first section that we did above, that was 10,000 or amount involved, whichever is higher. Now that we did is 10,000 or 100% of tax due, whichever is higher. Okay, next is your section 122.3. 122.3 has your 4 things that are covered. That is aids. Aids means helps. So aids or abets any offenses specified in section 122(1). So this 122(1) is the first one that we did, which has 18 offenses. So if you help someone in doing these offenses, you will be prosecuted under section 122(3), where the penalty is up to rupees 25,000. Okay, so this is the maximum limit that has been prescribed. If deals in goods and services in contravention of the act fails to appear when the summon is issued. A summon is when the court asks you to appear, that is a summon. So if the court asks you to appear and you did not appear, so you will be liable for a penalty. Next, fails to issue invoice in accordance with the provision. So if as per the provision you have not raised the invoice, then you will be coming under section 122(3). Okay, next is section 123. 123 talks about fails to furnish information in return. So while furnishing return, if you fail to furnish any information, your penalty will be rupees 100 rupees, will be 100 rupees per day till failure continues, maximum up to rupees 5,000. And section 124 talks about furnishing false information. So 123 fails to furnish information and 124 is furnishing false information. Now, of course, you will, it is logical that when you submit false information, your penalty would be much higher. So over here, as it was 100 per day and maximum 5,000, over here also it is 100 per day. Maximum instead of 5,000 will become 25,000. Remember, maximum instead of 5,000 it will become 25,000, and over and above there is a rupees 10,000 fine also. So 10,000 fine plus 100 rupees per day, maximum up to 25,000. This is for furnishing false information. If you fail to furnish information, then it is 100 rupees per day, maximum is rupees 5,000. Okay, if you want, pause the video 1 second, learn it while we are watching this video, and then we'll move forward. Okay, next is your section 125. 125 says if there is no separate penalty provided, if there is no separate provision for the offense that you have committed, in such a case your penalty will be rupees up to 25,000. And 126 talks about minor breach. So minor breach is when tax involved is less than rupees 5,000. So the tax involved is less than rupees 5,000, there will be no penalty. This is your section 126. Okay, now 129. 129 is a very important section because there has been an amendment in this section, in this part and this part. Okay, so 129 talks about seizure or detention of goods and conveyance. Now, seizure of goods means just the physical possession of goods have been taken, you are still the owner. So when the owner comes forward, so when the goods are seized and the owner comes forward on their own and claims that yes sir, these are my goods, in such a case, if the goods are taxable, your penalty will be 200% of tax. It will be 200% of the tax involved. And if these are exempted goods, it will be lower. Remember, it will be lower of it. It is the first place that we are studying for now. That is where penalty is lower. It will be lower of 2% of value of goods or 25,000. So 25,000 or 2% of value of goods, whichever is lower. This is in case of exempted goods and when the owner actually comes forward. Okay, now what happens? What happens when the owner does not come forward? When the owner does not come forward and these are taxable goods, it will be higher. It will be higher of 50% of value of goods or 200% of tax on such goods. So 50% of value of goods or 200% on the tax of such goods, whichever is higher. Okay, and if these are exempted goods, it will be lower of 5% of value of goods or 25,000. 5% of value of goods or 25,000, whichever is lower. So you see the difference. Over here it is higher, over here it is lower. Over here it is 5%, over here it is 50%. This is how much difference is there. Okay, so 50% or 200%, 50% value of goods or 200% of tax on such goods, whichever is higher, and exempted goods is lower of 5% of value of goods or 25,000, whichever is lower. Okay, so this was your section 129. Now section 130. 130 talks about confiscation. 130 talks about confiscation of goods and conveyance. So when I say confiscation, sir, what is the difference between seizure and confiscation? Seizure, only the physical possession of the goods are taken, you are still the owner. But in case of confiscation, the ownership also passes to the person who has confiscated the goods. Therefore, I've written possession plus ownership both have been transferred. So confiscation of goods and conveyance. Conveyance means your mode of transport also can be confiscated. So this will, what are the scenarios when this will happen? When use conveyance for transport of goods in contravention of GST law without the knowledge of the owner himself. Next, contravenes provision with intention to evade tax. That means your motive was to evade tax. Supplies or receive goods in contravention to GST law. Supplies goods liable to tax without registration. If the goods that you are supplying should have a necessary registration, but you have not registered, so therefore you will come under section 130 and your goods will be confiscated. Does not account for goods for which liable to pay tax. That means you are not showing it in your return as well. So therefore these goods can be confiscated. Okay, now what will be the penalty? So in case of goods, as I told you over here, it is confiscation of goods and conveyance. So in case of goods, it will be higher of market value of goods minus tax, or 100% of tax payable, whichever is higher. So market value of goods minus tax, or 100% of tax payable, whichever is higher, that will be your penalty on goods. Market value of goods minus tax, market value of goods minus tax, or 100% of tax payable, whichever is higher. And in case of conveyance, there is only one limit, that is tax payable on the goods. Tax payable on the goods will be your penalty for conveyance as well. Okay, next is your section 132. Now 132 has a list of 10 items. Supply of any goods or services without invoice. Issue of invoice without supply of goods or services. So these are vice versa, that you supplied goods and services but did not give invoice. Second is you issued invoice but did not give any goods and services. Third, avails ITC for invoices mentioned above. So for these invoices, you've availed ITC. That is your point number 3. Fourth is tax collected but not paid. You have collected tax but you did not pay to the government. Evades tax or fraudulently avails ITC. Evades tax, that means you are escaping tax. You are trying to ensure that you do not pay tax. Falsifies or substitutes financial records. You are changing anything in your records. Obstructs or prevents an officer from discharging his duties. Acquires possession of goods liable for confiscation. That means the goods that are supposed to be confiscated, you still have the possession. Tampers or destroys material evidence. And last is fails to supply information as required under the Act. So if you do not give the information, you will come under section 132. Now what is the penalty? So for offenses 1 to 5, for offenses 1 to 5, that is these 5. For offenses 1 to 5, if the amount involved is between 1 crores and 2 crores, if the amount involved is between 1 crores and 2 crores, your imprisonment will be 1 year plus fine. If it is between 2 crores and 5 crores, it will be 3 years. And if it is more than 5 crores, it will be 5 years. So 1, 3 and 5, 1 year, 3 year and 5 year plus your fine. Okay. If the amount involved is between 1 crore, 2 crore, 2 crore, 5 crore and 5 crore, up 1, 3, 5. Okay. Okay, next is section 179. So section 179, offenses 6, 7 and 9. So that is your 6, 7 and your 9. So for these, your amount involved, there is no limit. Your imprisonment will be 6 months plus a fine payment. And repetitive offense from 1 to 10. If you have a repetitive offense from 1 to 10, that means you've already done this offense and now you're doing this for the second time. It will be a 5-year fine. It will be a 5-year imprisonment plus fine. Okay. Next is your section 133, and with this we are done with our chapter. Section 133 talks about if a person discloses any information or contents. If a person discloses any information or contents of any return furnished under the Act, other than when required by law. So if you have filed the return of your client and you disclose this information to someone else other than when it is actually required by law, in such a case your fine will be up to 25,000 or and. Okay, so therefore this is a slash and. So either and imprisonment up to 6 months. So in such a case you will be put a fine of 25,000 and imprisonment up to 6 months. And last is your section 138, that is your compounding of offense. So compounding means paying an amount as penalty or fees instead of imprisonment. So when an offense also has an imprisonment attached to it, so the law has given you an option that boss, if you do not want to do the imprisonment, you pay a fine. So paying an amount as penalty or fees instead of imprisonment. No proceedings initiated once paid. So if you paid this amount, there will be no proceedings. Compounding is not possible when in some circumstances compounding will not be possible. A person already compounded once under section 132 from 1 to 6. So if you've already compounded, if under section 132 from 1 to 6, if for these offenses you have already compounded, in such a case you will not be given this option again. Next, a person already compounded once of value more than 1 crore. So if you compounded an offense whose value is more than 1 crore, you will not be given a second option. Excuse me. A person accused of committing an offense under the act, which is also an offense under any other law. So if this is also an offense under any other law, compounding will not be allowed. And last is a person convicted by court. So if a person has already been convicted by a court, compounding section 138, compounding will not be allowed. Okay, so lower limit, what is the maximum that you will pay and what is the what is the minimum that you will pay and what is the maximum that you will pay? So your lower limit is higher of 50% of tax involved. Okay, so we will do both of these together. Over here it is 50% of tax involved, over here it is 150% of tax involved. So lower limit is 50% of tax involved, higher limit is 150% of tax involved, and your second limit over here is 10,000 and 30,000. So what you observe is this 50% becomes 150%, this 10,000 becomes 30,000. That means your lower limit, to reach from your lower limit to your higher limit, you only have to multiply with 3 and you get your higher limit. Okay, and with this we are done with this chapter, offenses and penalties, and I'll see you with customs now.